So let's talk about Norway. And a lot of people might be asking themselves, why Norway? The question in all reality should be, why not? When you look at Norway, you got to start talking about Vikings. You got to start talking about Ragnar Lothbrok. You got to start talking about Rollo. You got to start talking about Bjorn Ironside and that entire legend. Although a lot of it is associated also with Denmark, but what I'm talking about is that whole region of the world, Scandinavia. You got to start talking about exploration. You got to start talking about the legends that we have inherited as a society. Every single time that you hear stories about ogres, every single time that you hear stories about trolls, every single time that you hear stories about these mythical legends, and you hear stories about, well, Thor, Odin, Sif, Loki and his children, the Fenris wolf, hell. You are talking about Norway. So why not explore it? Now, in our case, the very first thing that we did was basically book a trip to Norway with a brand new airline that actually is flying out of our home city, which is Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So the name of the airline happens to be North Atlantic Airways. Some people have actually told us that it's basically kind of like a rebranding of Norwegian, so at least the international branch, because later on we flew in Norway on Norwegian Airlines. So at least they're still active within Norway. But we took a brand new flight. As a matter of fact, the very first trip that North Atlantic Airways took place on June 20th. And we literally flew out of Fort Lauderdale on July 8th. So literally we were one of the very first groups to actually fly all the way from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Oslo, Norway. The trip, we left late in the afternoon, Friday night. Literally the airplane left at 5:45 p.m. I believe we were actually a little late on the leaving. However, maybe by a couple of minutes, maybe like around 10 minutes probably, if I remember correctly. However, once we were in the air, I guess the pilot picked up pace and we landed in Norway on Saturday morning, at least more or less 20 minutes early. Basically, the landing was supposed to take place at 9:30 a.m. We landed more or less at around 9:10 a.m. So it was a very pleasant flight. The airplanes are brand new, so I highly recommend it. If you're planning, if Norway is in your bucket list, definitely book North Atlantic. It's a very cheap flight, at least comparatively to what a flight to Norway actually used to be. So again, I highly recommend North Atlantic, and the service was incredible. Now, once we got to Gardermoen Airport in Norway, one of the very first things that you got to realize is the fact that it is not located inside of Oslo itself. It's actually like about 30 minutes outside of Oslo. And that was something that, we prepared for a little when we were trying to book more or less the hotels and so on. Even though the planning wasn't perfect, we kind of locked out primarily when it came to that first location that we ended up in. So once you get out of the airplane, and in our case, we were a little famished, a little hungry, because on the flight you can buy food and all of that. However, my girlfriend, she doesn't like eating mayo, and she ordered a sandwich and it had mayo. So the whole point is that once we landed, she was famished. We decided to stop by a pizza place, and we got 2 slices. Her pizza and my pizza were actually very dry, but either way, we enjoyed it as much as we could, and off we were on our way. The very first thing that we had to deal with was finding a way to get to Oslo. We were thinking of getting an Uber, we were thinking of getting a taxi. However, soon someone there to provide you with information actually told us that the best way to actually make it to the city, to Oslo center, is literally by taking a flight again. The flight again happens to be the train, and it connects you directly from the airport to basically 2 or 3 stops, train stops, after the Oslo center, the Oslo city center. In our case, it so happens that the hotel we picked was not located in Oslo center itself. It was actually located in a place called Sandvika, which would be kind of like a neighborhood that is more or less like about 20 to 30 minutes also away from Oslo, past Oslo center, as I mentioned before. So it was, we were discovering new things as we were going along. Once we took the train, and basically the same price takes you everywhere. It's just one way or a round trip that you can buy. We bought a one-way ticket for like about $20 each, and off we were. So we made it to the hotel in Sandvika. We made it to the train station. At the train station, we actually made it from the 3rd floor down to the base and order an Uber. It so happens that the hotel was literally located like a corner away. We could have walked there, but the Uber came in. The Uber driver, his name was Ahmed. He picked us up. He literally took us down to a corner away. He was surprised when I gave him a tip, and he sent a message back thanking me for that. But it was a very interesting experience. Again, had we known better, had we checked the map, we would have known that the hotel was literally located like a step away from the train station. But again, part of the learning curve and the surprises that you find when you're traveling. The hotel that we booked first, at least for that first night, was the Thun Oslofjorden in Sandvika. And it actually turned out to be a magnificent find. It's a very comfortable hotel. The lobby is beautiful. The hallways are a little bit strange in the way they look, but once you get inside the rooms, they're incredibly spacious and incredibly comfortable. So we were quite happy. The location itself is very central. And it's right next to the water. You get to see some of the boats close by. As a matter of fact, you feel that even if you get out of the hotel and you start exploring, you can actually make it to the bay and make it to the side of the water, which in our case we tried, but we couldn't find a way to make it through the forest and through the tree line into the water itself. But that was the next day. Well, once we got there, we rested for a little bit. We decided not to spend too much time, not to waste too much time. It was already in the afternoon, and we got to be thankful to the concierge who allowed us to actually check in earlier than we were supposed to. Checking in the hotel was, I believe, like at 1 p.m. and we literally got there like around 10:30 to 11. So they allowed us to check in. They found a room for us, and we were incredibly comfortable and taken care of that day. Again, we rested for a couple of hours, then decided that one, we needed to maximize our time as much as possible. Two, that we were hungry and we needed to find somewhere to eat. My brother, who had been to Oslo before, recommended that the first thing that I should do in Oslo was to go to the Vinsland Park, which is the Frogger Park as well. So it is literally a place where a sculptor has created a magnificent show of his art, and this is a sculpture from the 1940s. I believe his name was Edward Vinsland, and hence the name of the park. So all his statues are incredibly amazing. Once you walk in, you feel like you have stepped into a whole new world. And this is a park that is completely open to the public, completely free to the public, for everyone to explore, and is magnificent in every single way. Every single statue is original. Every single piece of art really pops. And the central piece that everyone goes there to see is what is called the monolith, which was, I believe, created in the 1930s and 40s, and actually was supposed to be in front of the palace of the King of Norway, and eventually was actually moved and transported to this location, where it's actually shown with the rest of the art of Mr. Vinsland. So again, it's a magnificent place. I highly recommend that everyone that goes to Oslo makes a stop there and gets to experience the beauty, the magnificence, the opulence of this fantastic location. The art itself mirrors that great amazing art from the 1930s and 1940s, the grandeur that you get to see in films like Triumph of the Will, and that was really popular within that time period. So again, I highly recommend checking the Vinchland Park or the Frogner Park as well. In our case, once we were done with the park and relaxing a little, we decided to go and get something to eat, and we went to the Tataki restaurant, Asian restaurant, which was right around the corner. We literally just walked around the park and went to Tataki Asian food, and decided to sit there, decided to see more or less what they had to offer. We ordered a lot of food that was incredibly well cooked, incredibly tasty, incredibly amazing. However, when it came to the price, we were surprised. The price was modest, was great, but we didn't know how to tip, and we asked I basically wrote down what we usually are comfortable with, which is 20% of the bill. And when we asked the waitress, she was like, "Oh no, that is too much money." So either way, we left it at that. I guess in Norway, or one of the things that we learned later on, is that in Norway it's not customary for you to tip your waiter or waitress for their service. They are already well compensated by their employers. They're treated well. It's not like in the US where, again, the tip is what basically makes up for the salary of the waiter and the waiters. So it's a little different, the waiter or the waitress, and it's a little different in that regard. So once we were done with that, we were still kind of like ready to continue partying, so we decided to walk around the streets, which were completely empty. This is one of the things that really surprised us. There's not as many people as we expected in the middle of the street. We actually thought of Oslo first, kind of like as a ghost town, because it's literally Saturday night and there are very few people in the street. So eventually we heard some live music coming out of this location, and we stepped in. The live music happened to be English, rock and blues from the 1950s and 60s, which was awesome. So we felt right at home. It so happens that he was a musician from Memphis, Tennessee, that was actually visiting, and he was playing music at the Irish pub, the old Irish pub. And so we stepped in and we bought a couple of drinks. We had a great time, and then he was done with his set. And one of the things that we noticed that was happening was that the older people were staying behind and were listening to the blues and were listening to his music, and the younger people, they were passing by and disappearing up a staircase that was right next to us. So we decided to go and explore and see more or less where they were disappearing to. So once we made it there, we realized that it was a whole different party. It was a rock band that was setting up the stage at the moment, and literally they took the stage. The people were already in the mood to party that night. Everything felt perfect. They started singing the right songs, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s classics. But the place literally erupted into a frenzy when the guitar player decided to start playing the riff to Sweet Child of Mine. And automatically everyone got off their seat, took over to the stage and started just dancing and getting into it. The party was so awesome that it literally lasted hours. We left at more or less 3:30 to 4, and it was still going really strong. So yeah, then once we left, we tried to get an Uber, and we had several Uber drivers cancel on us, which was rather funny because their excuse was always like there was an accident, but we looked at the traffic and there was almost no traffic whatsoever. Norway is not a place that is known for crime, so I don't know really exactly why they canceled, but either way, at least 3 Uber drivers canceled on us, and then later on, people told us that Uber was not working in Norway, or at least in Oslo. That's when we came back, so we figured that quite possibly there might have been a conflict when it came to the policies of Uber, or maybe Uber was just brand new working in Oslo and they were trying to figure things out. But either way, the 4th driver came in and he picked us up and everything turned out great. He took us to our location. We tipped him really well. He felt quite thankful again, and we were able to spend the night in our comfortable hotel room, which was really great. The next thing that really surprised us was the Thun Hotel Oslo Fjorden, which has a magnificent breakfast. So we woke up really early for the breakfast because we were gonna take a plane to Stavanger also later on that day. So we decided to come down. What they do is literally in the lobby, they also have a restaurant, and they close the restaurant out or down completely for the breakfast. And they have a little bit of everything. I mean, it should be experience. And we were comparing it to some of the best continental breakfasts and the worst experiences that we've had traveling. We literally went to St. Petersburg, Florida, and I almost had to have a fight with the lady behind the counter, the concierge, because she had the continental breakfast was literally handing me a croissant and I think a donut, and that was it. And I asked her, well, can I have that other donut right there? And she's like, no, that's for someone else. And I mean, so that's part of our experience when it comes to traveling. That hotel in St. Petersburg, I'm never returning back to again. In the meantime, here, you have a magnificent buffet of everything you could have dreamed of, and top quality food. Everyone who was there was incredibly impressed, incredibly satisfied, and we had to be honest with them. I asked permission to start taking pictures to post on social media, and I was going to rave about them, and this is an example of making true and being true to that promise. So again, they treated us really well. That breakfast blew us away. I highly recommend that if you are gonna go to Oslo, pass by just a couple of stops over to Sandvika, stay over at the Thun Oslo Fjorden, and yeah, enjoy yourself.